Welcome to the GI Nutrition Show. I'm Amy McCrea, registered dietitian and CEO of Grounded Root Nutrition. Today's topic is what you need to know about Candida and the Candida diet. Today's topic is all about Candida and the Candida diet. So let's start with what is Candida. So Candida, typically Candida albicans is the one you hear about, is a yeast. And it causes yeast overgrowth, or also a fungal infection might be the other way you hear about it. But Candida actually is a natural resident in our gut. It is supposed to live there. However, all of the other bacteria in our gut and really having a strong lining keeps it in check. And when it gets out of balance, that's when we have an issue. So how on earth does it get out of balance and do you get this so-called Candida overgrowth? Stress is the number one. So we all know, and we've talked about it before, that stress really degrades or breaks down that gut lining and really all of your mucosal linings throughout your body. So stress, number one, bad. So really making sure that you're managing your stress level, incredibly important. Can't harp on it enough. That aside, illness is another way. So when you are sick, obviously you're stressed, but when you're sick, you're not necessarily eating the most robust diet, and it allows the degradation and breakdown of that mucin layer. And also one of the things that we experience during high times of stress as well as illness is a change in pH of our stomach acid. And when that pH changes from becoming really, really acidic and it begins to become more alkaline, it allows the growth of these opportunistic pathogens. Last week we touched on H. pylori. It's one of the things that loves a more alkaline stomach acid, and Candida is no exception to that rule. It's the perfect opportunity for it to blossom and start growing. Additionally, the Western diet. Let's take a few minutes to talk about this Western diet because it is really, truly the number one culprit for Candida overgrowth. So the Western diet is really high in processed foods, perhaps alcohol, and sugars. Great. What it is really low in is whole foods, great sources of protein, lots of fruits, and lots of vegetables. Really low in all of those things. The fruits might be the exception for some of us. And what we find is when we don't have all of these whole foods that actually provide natural probiotics for our gut, it allows these opportunistic pathogens, such as Candida, to take over and overgrowth, just proliferate, reproduce, and really have a heyday in our gut and kind of throughout our whole body. Not an ideal situation for any of us, really. So that is the primary driver for how Candida overgrowth happens. And then we also add in alcohol, and it just makes the whole situation worse. So Candida, not great. It's easy to allow it to overgrow with the type of diet we're generally surrounded with in the Western world. But then we hear about this thing called the Candida diet. And if you do a simple search on the internet, because maybe you think you have Candida, you're going to come up with an endless list of people that mention this thing called a Candida diet. So let's take a step back for just a second, because one thing I forgot to touch on was, well, how do you know if you have Candida? If you're working with me, we're going to know from the stool test that we do. It's going to come back and it's going to give us an awesome number. Not only the stool test, but an organic acid test, which is done through urine, is also another great test that we can utilize to see if you have a Candida overgrowth. Some of the symptoms that you might experience are generic symptoms that are the same for a lot of things, like chronic fatigue, brain fog. You can have some upset stomach. You might have recurring yeast infections or a white film in your mouth. We call that oral thrush. Frequent sinus infections or food sensitivities. Maybe your nails on your fingernails and or your toenails have a bit of a fungal infection on them, or immune system is weak, joint pain, low mood. All these symptoms that we've talked about before are also the same symptoms for Candida and other bacteria pathogens that might be going on within your body. But then if you continue reading about this Candida diet, it's going to say, if you think you have Candida and you have all of these things, well, let's go on what we call the Candida diet. So let me just tell you what the internet says if we go in to visit the Candida diet and we do a quick Google search on it. What does it say? First of all, it says you need to eat low sugar. And the reason it says that is because Candida is a yeast and fungus loves sugar. And what's the proof that fungus loves sugar? Well, let's think about when we make bread. When we make bread and we're instructed to proof our yeast, it is a combination of the right temperature liquid plus yeast plus sugar. And you stir it all up and then you let it sit and it's just going to reproduce and the yeast is going to bubble because it is feeding on that sugar. Yeast loves sugar. Sugar is in all types of carbohydrates. So all those breads, all these processed foods. Sugar is in fruit. It's in some of our vegetables. I mean, just the list goes on and on. So the first element of a quote unquote Candida diet is low sugar. And it restricts fruits as well as processed foods. Okay. The next thing it likes to focus on is a gluten-free diet. So changing your grains. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't matter what type of grain you put in your body, you're still going to have the same type of effect. It's still a carbohydrate. It's a complex sugar. And you're still eating it. It's a complex carbohydrate. It's going to be a source of glucose for your body no matter what. And we need glucose in our body because we have to fuel our brain. All right. So then it also says that it's an anti-inflammatory diet. So it's supposed to reduce the inflammation in your body. And there is a lot of truth to the Candida diet reducing inflammation in your diet, in your body. But the question that I have for you, or the challenge that I'm going to put out there is it the Candida diet reducing inflammation because it's reducing the Candida? Or is it really reducing inflammation because what it's doing is challenging you to eat a more whole foods diet? And we already know that if we eat a more whole foods diet, we're going to feel a whole lot better. And we're going to have a lot better microbiome. All the pathogens within our gut are going to be the right ones. So I'm going to put that out there for you. So the Candida diet really goes on to tell you to have non-starchy vegetables, low sugar fruits, gluten-free grains, healthy proteins. You can have some dairy, but it's selective for the type of dairy. It even looks at the type of nuts and seeds to make sure that they're ones with low mold, because we know mold is a type of fungus. It restricts herbs, spices, and condiments, as well as your fats and oils. It also pulls out all of your sweeteners, really. Fermented foods, there's a focus on adding some fermented foods, but as we've talked before, fermented foods can be quite a challenge for a certain population of individuals, and they are not the first line of defense that I go to rebuild a strong gut. And then there's drinks like chicory coffee and herbal teas, and there's different ways that you can incorporate all of these things. So when we take all this into consideration, the next question that I come to is, do I, as a dietitian, recommend the Candida diet? And the simple answer is no. And the reason I don't is because it is an exhaustive list of all of these rules and foods that you have to follow for 2 to 3 months while your body heals. And what I want you to think about, I already said this once, is what if we simply added whole foods into your diet and it became less processed foods, and we also eliminated alcohol for a certain period of time? When it comes back in, it comes back in moderation. But if we did all of these things, it's going to change the composition of your gut naturally because you are feeding your body with good probiotics. That is really what we're after and really what we want. So I don't recommend the quote unquote Candida diet for any of my patients. It is also mentally exhausting to follow this type of list for months. And that mental energy causes so much stress that the stress, we've talked about this before, lowers that stomach acid, makes it more likely that these such things proliferate. Not great. There's also not any scientific evidence to prove that the Candida diet is actually reducing the Candida in our body because it is the quote-unquote Candida diet. The evidence points to the fact that if we simply incorporate more whole foods in our diet, we're going to restructure our microbiome, when we restructure our microbiome, we're already going to bring down that population of Candida. So I go for a food-first approach with all of my patients, and I fully believe that you've got to live life too. So what does that mean? Well, it's your birthday, it's your friend's birthday, you go out, sure you can have the cake, but I want you to have the cake with the meal. Have vegetables, have protein, maybe minimal carbs for your meal, once you're going to have cake as more of your carbs, or just kind of be really cognizant of that. You don't want to overload the carbs in your meal because you're going to add cake to it at the end. So just have an awareness when you're eating, be more intentional and be more mindful. That itself is one of the best ways to manage Candida overgrowth and really an overgrowth of any type of pathogen. So you know my thoughts. Candida diet gets 2 thumbs down for me. So in addition to really taking a whole foods approach to healing the microbiome in your gut, we're also going to incorporate some supplements to help bring those numbers down a little bit quicker. If you suspect that you might have Candida overgrowth or that Candida is a problem for you already, good to know I'm here to help you heal. As a functional nutrition dietitian, I work with patients in all walks of life to restore health and enjoy life again. So I hope you enjoyed today's show. Please visit my website, groundedrootnutrition.com, to learn more about how I can become a partner in your health journey, or contact me directly at hello@groundedrootnutrition.com. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again soon.